Do you think that Jesus has ever marveled at you?
If so, I hope it was for a good reason.
Welcome. Welcome in to Bearing Up, the podcast for Christian encouragement. I was going to do like this weird, I don't know. Serious opener. Welcome in to Bearing Up.
Yeah.
But we're not that show.
Or no.
We're going to relax a little bit. We're going to enjoy.
I think everyone needs to relax a little bit.
Maybe I'm too relaxed. But for us, it's Saturday morning.
I'm always relaxed.
Yeah, I know. All right, so let's get the show on the road. I'm Zach Griffin, of course. I don't know if I've said this yet or not, but I'm Zach. With me's Logan. We are your hosts for this show. You've probably seen us before. If not, then congratulations.
That's right.
I think one of the reasons why I'm a little excited is because I told Logan before we got started I've listened to the first 20 episodes of this show on double speed because we said something about doing some episodes. We'll do an episode on that.
It's like every time.
Yeah, so we are preparing for season 4 where we're gonna just do that, I think. But anyway, we're gonna jump into our real topic for today, our big question here, and I've wondered that too. I asked you, Logan, but I've asked that of myself too, and I wonder, has Jesus ever marveled at me? Maybe not, but there are a couple places in Scripture where we actually see Jesus marvel at someone or wonder at someone.
Yeah.
Just to begin with, what does it mean to marvel at something?
I think it's just like to step back and be like, oh my goodness, like this is awesome. And that's a word. I heard a lesson when I was in high school, I believe, one time, that and basically the point the teacher of the class was making at church was we shouldn't use the word awesome because only God is awesome. And I agreed with it to an extent, but I'll still say things are awesome. That maybe they're not really awesome, but anyway, that's kind of where my mind goes with this. Is like in awe. When we say something's awesome, we're in awe of it,
Right.
and I think that's in the similar vein of marveling at it. We marvel at. It's just you want to step back when you see the Grand Canyon. If you've never seen the Grand Canyon in person, you can't really comprehend the actual size of it. Because when I say miles across, not only the length of it, but just from one side to the other, it's that doesn't do it justice. But when you see it in person, you just, oh my goodness, wow, this is incredible. I can't see on the other side barely. I mean, that's just how incredible it is, and it's just marveling and awesome to look at. And so I guess that's kind of where my mind goes when you say to marvel at something after I put all the comic books aside.
Yeah, after you put Marvel comics. So you've seen the Grand Canyon before?
I have, yeah.
Oh, I never have. So I wouldn't. You're right. I probably wouldn't be able to comprehend.
It's incredible, and I mean, I think it's something everybody should see. It's one of those things that's just like it's one of those things that God put on earth to be like, go see it and realize how small you are.
Yeah.
One of those, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with your statement there about what it means to marvel at something.
Mm-hmm.
We can, I think I've put another synonym up already to wonder at something. I like that feeling of, or that description of the awe. And whenever I talk about God is awesome, I usually clarify awesome in the traditional sense of the word.
Yeah.
Awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
And yeah, I use that word all the time too. Well, that's awesome, man. Different things like that.
Yeah.
But But yeah, so it's interesting if we think about what that term means, and then to think that Jesus did this, and that's just like it's kind of interesting because you might think, well, you can't really surprise Jesus; he's God, I mean, and so how is it that Jesus could marvel at someone? And how is it that there are situations where if we look at it as awe, like he was in awe at a response that somebody made or what they did. I mean, it's like that must be a pretty big deal. Whatever they did must have been huge because this isn't like it's not riddled throughout the gospel accounts. This isn't something that happened all the time. Like, there's a lot of things that are repetitive in the gospels, little statements and things, that we find repeatedly. The phrase "the kingdom of heaven is like." I mean, like that could be one of Jesus's, his catchphrases. I mean, because you hear it so often, but like this, we don't find it's not riddled throughout the gospel accounts, and so when it does happen, that must be a pretty big deal,
right? And to me, it shows two things. And as you're talking, I think of two specific things. First of all, it shows that Jesus was human. I don't necessarily. Maybe God can, but I think it's less of a godly trait and more of a human trait to marvel. Because what does God have to marvel at but Himself? So that shows to me the humanness of Christ, first of all. But second of all, it shows, because Christ was omnipotent, it shows how much of free will God has given us. It shows the free will. Because Jesus pretty much knew what was going to happen a lot at the time. But for Him to marvel at something, even though He knew it was going to happen, or had an idea of how it was going to happen, we don't really understand completely Christ's total omnipotence. But for Him to marvel at it shows that there was something extra that person or that person He was marveling at went above, even beyond what He thought was capable of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jesus probably knew what these people were going to do and how everything was going to go down. But there are places in Scripture where Jesus does this. He has this sort of emotional reaction to things, such as the death of Lazarus.
Yeah,
he waited so that he would die, and before he even goes there, he says, "I've waited. He's dead, but I'm going so that you might believe." He knows He's going to raise him from the dead.
Yeah,
like that's His full intent. But then He gets to the tomb with Mary, and she's crying, and Jesus weeps. So it's just like, I mean, He knows what He's about to do. Like,
yeah.
I mean, why would I cry if I know He's going to come up out of that tomb? But I think there's something to be said about, and maybe this is really a completely different direction than I.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But no, it's good. But there are times where Jesus wants us to understand. I don't think it's the Scriptures say that Jesus marveled for His own sake.
That's a good point.
But maybe to help us see. I don't think Jesus cried or wept for His own sake when He was at the tomb with Lazarus or with Mary. I don't think He wept for His own sake, because, and He even says there, when He prayed, He says, "I pray not for myself, but so all these people around me will know that I'm yours." I mean, like, He says that prayer there.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so that they will believe. And so but Jesus, I think, sometimes wants us to see, and this is really just a different direction, I think. But
No, I'm sorry.
we take a moment. We appreciate the beauty. We appreciate the sensitivity of a moment. And I think we can see that you have two very sensitive moments here that we're going to look at. So the first, we're going to turn in our Bibles to Mark chapter 6. All right, so Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. Logan, why don't you read that from me?
Okay. And this is the CSB. I got my phone, so Mark chapter 6, beginning of verse 1. He left there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who had heard him were astonished. "Where did this man get these things?" they said. "What is the wisdom that has been given to him? And how are these miracles performed by his hands? Isn't this the carpenter's son, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? And aren't his sisters here with us?" So they So they were offended by him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown, among his relatives and his household." Verse 5. He was not able to do a miracle there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. And he was going around the villages teaching.
Okay. So in verse 6, the CSB says, and he was amazed.
Yeah.
The New American Standard says he wondered.
Mm.
The ESV says he marveled.
Interesting.
And so all of those, they're synonymous with each other,
right.
Of course. But, before we ask really why Jesus marveled at them, I do want us to kind of talk about the relationship that these people had with him. Who are these people? Is this just some town that he rolled up in, or is this something different?
No, this is where he grew up.
Yeah, right. So where he grew up, and I think about small towns, right?
Yeah.
Small town pride.
I think everybody can relate to this.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe not in the small town sense, but like in the circle you grew up in sense.
Yeah, the circle you grew up in sense. So, in a sense, these people are set up for success.
Mm-hmm.
They are, they've got a relationship with Jesus already. They probably have heard of the circumstances of his birth. They knew him. I really don't think that Jesus was a bratty child. There's no reason for us to believe that. When he was 12, he stayed behind, in the temple to listen. That's all we see of his adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
But even at 12 years old, he's telling his parents, "Do you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" So, it's not like something clicked when he was 30 years old and, all right, now I'm going to be a godly man. No, I really don't think that Jesus was a bratty child. So, these people should have been his biggest supports, in a sense. Like you said, I think a lot of us can kind of think about, that circle that we grew up with. So, what do you think about that? I see you kind of you're thinking about it a little bit.
Well, I'm thinking, it reminds me of, and I'm blanking on where it's at. I was really trying to remember where it was at. When Jesus was teaching and his mother and brothers were outside the house, and they're like, "Hey, your mother and brothers are out there." And they were there to be like, "Hey, you need to knock this off. You're kind of going crazy and giving the family a bad name." I'm paraphrasing there. But he was like, "I'm not going to go talk to them." So, that's what it reminds me of. Because, again, it's those people that have known him since he's little. So there's this... I don't know. I think a lot about myself in this situation. Because the church I grew up at, everybody who's there, everybody who saw me grow up, they saw me go through flaws. They saw me go through things. And they saw me... they saw me at my worst, quite honestly, the immaturity. And I don't know how immature Jesus was or how, we don't know that, like you said, we don't get any of that. I don't imagine that he was a bad kid, like you said. I imagine him being like this pristine child, but he was still human. So, there was something there that maybe obviously not sinful, but like a childlike. Anyway, we see all that. I say all that to say this, that the people who have watched you from birth to now, they know all about you, and these people looking at him saying, like, we know who you are. We know you're not the Son of God. Or in their mind, that's what they're saying. Because we know who your father is. We know who your mother is. So what's this about? The interesting part of all this to me, and again, I'm sorry, rabbit hole, but whatever. Another episode, asterisk.
Don't say that phrase.
I'm sorry. Which one?
Just kidding.
Another episode?
Another episode. It's more we have to do.
In the version I just read, said he was not able to do a miracle there, it says because of their unbelief. So that's a whole other episode. Tag that, file it for later. But I just think I think what Jesus is amazed at here, their unbelief, what he's dealing with here is something that everybody for all time deals with. And I see that more here than I did in Dallas, because I'm an outsider here because I moved here just a few years ago, but everybody knows everybody in this small town, and it was probably very similar to this that Jesus is going through.
Well, and I don't know about the, like, again, we don't know what Jesus was like, younger. Again, there's no way he was a bratty child. Like, I really, don't think that he was. But there are, because you have a relationship, and it doesn't even matter anything about Jesus or what he did or what he was like. It's a hard thing, even in today's standards, and I think this sometimes is a struggle with me being the preacher in Moultrie, where I grew up. Like, some of the people that I'm preaching to were my first Bible class teachers. And so it's kind of like, yeah, he's a good preacher.
I taught him that.
I don't know about
kidding,
that.
I'm kidding.
But are they willing to accept a challenge from me as much as, somebody else?
Right.
Jesus comes in and he's coming with this authority, right? What are they really? They are amazed, right? They are astonished, and the questions are, where did this man get these things, and what is this wisdom given to him, and such miracles as performed by his hands? So like all of this, he's got all this stuff. Where is he, to do this? And we knew him as a child, so it's like, they should have been his biggest supports, I think. But there's also that challenge, and I think that that's recognized here in the very statement that instead of saying in verse 1, Jesus went out from there and returned to Nazareth, it says that Jesus came into his hometown, right? It uses that language, and I think that's intentional there. Like, this is the place where he came from. This should have been his greatest supports, and I think that's really why Jesus marveled.
Yeah,
is that they were set up. They knew him. Like, it wasn't just some stranger rolling in. They probably saw his character. Many of those people probably took that trip with them when he was 12 years old
to Jerusalem,
and they probably remember Mary and Joseph turning back
to go get him,
to go and find him, and they may have had to turn back too, or maybe they went on, but they probably remembered that, and they got home, and I mean, all of this is speculation.
No, you're right.
But Mary and Joseph may have been like, well, this is what he told us. I must be about my Father's business. I mean, I don't know, but it's just interesting that there was a relationship prior, and I don't know. I think that's probably why Jesus marveled at them, wondered at them.
Right. And one thing that you kind of alluded to just a second ago that I will defend his hometown people in is that they really? Say this is the son of the carpenter. Now, if he were coming and he was teaching everybody how to build a table, they would probably listen. But it's to analogize it. Ooh, big word, Logan.
You're always making up words.
Look it up. But to put it with what you were with your personal story, You went to college for Bible. You went to college for that. So even though those people were taught you since you were little, you have surpassed what they know because of your study, because of your profession. And so it's not like Jesus went and studied at the synagogue. And I guess a little bit, probably when he was there, he interfaced with them. But he was God, and he had that. So it wasn't. It was not. It was because I believe it was because he was not studied in the human terminology in the areas that he was preaching about, that they were like, okay, I'm not. This is ridiculous. And he was to the point where he was not even able to do miracles. So I think it's interesting, the human nature that comes out all throughout the Bible. And we like to look back and say, how did they not see it? That's just ridiculous. And if we were there, we would have been doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's very likely that, I think that, it's interesting. There were a few miracles that he did.
Yes.
Right? He did heal a few sick people.
There was enough belief for a few sick people to be healed.
Yeah. So, not everyone there, disbelieved, but it seemed like most of them, right? And so Jesus, he makes this statement: a prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown and among his own relatives and his own household. So I think there's some principles and application we may take about preaching, in your hometown. But is there any other application that we could take from this? And maybe, I don't know. I feel like sometimes we, in a very different way, are set up for success. We are set up. We're put in the right environment. We're put with the right people. We're put with, and for some reason we just, we don't come away in faith. I've known a lot of people that, godly people, godly parents, they raise their children, one becomes a preacher and the other becomes a drug addict. And I'm like, maybe it hasn't been that far, but one falls away and one doesn't. And they're brought up in the church and they're set up in this great environment.
Raised the same. Yeah.
Raised the same, and, so I don't know, is there some sort of application for us to maybe learn from them in this way? You're set up, perhaps, to have faith, and then you just reject it.
I'll say, if you were born in America, you're set up to have faith, first of all. So I think this is a good analogy. Because this is the freest country, even though, I won't get into that. This is the freest country in the history of the world. And so we've been set up perfectly. So the problem is human nature steps in and it says, well, when we get so comfortable, we take it for granted. And that happens in religion, faith, that happens in marriages, that happens in jobs. You get comfortable, and you begin to take things for granted, and then you lose it.
Right.
And so the application is, don't be comfortable thinking that you've got it. Make yourself uncomfortable, and make yourself uncomfortable before somebody else does.
Well, I think that's actually a great application. I didn't think of that, but I feel like that's probably the best way to come away from that. Yeah. They were comfortable with the relationship they had with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And we can see that with his parent, his family too. Yeah. It is earlier in the book of Mark.
That's right.
Where his mother and brothers come to him. I really want to find this because what it says there is perfect.
I'll let you keep looking, but what it says is, or excuse me, not what it says. What is fascinating about that dynamic with his mother and brothers is when you go back and look at the first miracle he did at the wedding. Mm-hmm. And his mother was like, just listen to him, he'll do it. Like she knew, she had this knowledge that, well, first of all, she knew he was God. She was a virgin, like, and she gave birth to this boy and from God, and she knew this, and yet she's talking to him and telling him, "Hey, knock it off." Like, I think maybe she forgot along the way, but anyway, that's also fascinating with what she does at the wedding with his first miracle, because that would not have been super long time. I understand maybe if that had never happened. Okay, it's been 30 years. Humans are forgetful, but within like months or years, just a handful of, like, not a long time, she went from listen to him, he's just do whatever he tells you at the wedding, to now trying to pull him aside and tell him to be quiet. Like, she's the one who pushed him out in the open. She's the one who initiated his launch, if you will, into the world as a son of God.
Yeah.
So that is a whole nother dynamic that you want to look at Mary and be like, "Well, I don't understand what your thought process is."
If anyone was set up to have faith, and
now Mary isn't mentioned
Jesus
specifically in Mark here, but she's the one who tries to pull him aside earlier in the book.
Yeah, so it's in verse 21 of chapter 3.
Okay.
The New American Standard says when his own people, but it could be his own kinsmen, his own family. When they heard of this, they went out to take custody of him, for they were saying he has lost his senses. Right? His own family thought he was crazy, so they tried to when did that occur?
Yeah.
When things began to be uncomfortable.
Correct.
That's it. And so maybe that's the application for us.
Yeah.
The world, it pushes on us to live and to be a certain way, and it's very enticing. And so there's a natural tension that Christians, we live with. It's a war. It's a spiritual war. We have to wear armor, and we're in this constant battle through our lives, and we can't give up.
Yep.
And it's just so easy to I'll just give up on the war.
Yeah.
And I can just live my life and be comfortable and just pretend that it's not there and do whatever I want.
Correct.
And I don't have to live with guilt, and I don't have to, because I'll just ignore it, and I'll just, and there'll be times where I maybe, I think about it again and I just shut it out with distractions. And, so we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to jump into a very different way in which Jesus marveled at someone. So hold on to your seat, and we'll be right back. Thanks so much for watching or listening to the show today. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, do that stuff on our social media. Also, check out the Ministry League. They have a wonderful website, a great app. They keep on updating it all the time. Lots of Christian resources. So we want to give them a shout out. Please look into the Ministry League, and consider becoming a patron on Patreon. We do live videos every week. There's a lot of extra stuff. Join the mug club. You'll get a mug, and you'll get lots of extra stuff, early access to things. So please consider doing that on Patreon, checking us out there, and we'll continue this episode. But thank you so much for watching or listening today. Okay, right. So let's continue. Now we're going to look at Luke chapter 7. Luke 7 verses 1 through 10. And yeah, this is a very different way in which Jesus marveled at someone. And so let's turn there. I'll go ahead and read this one since you read the last one. The New American Standard. When he had completed all his discourse in the hearing of the people, he went to Capernaum. And a centurion's slave, who was highly regarded by him, was sick and about to die. When he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders asking him to come and save the life of his slave. When they came to Jesus, they earnestly implored him, saying, "He is worthy of you to grant this to him, for he loves our nation and it is he who built us our synagogue." Now Jesus started on his way with him. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself further, for I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. For this reason I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am a man placed under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to the one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and he does it." Now when Jesus heard this, he marveled at him, and turned and said to the crowd that was following him, "I say to you, not even in Israel have I found such great faith." When those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the slave in good health. All right. So, very different scenario. Uh, you know, we talked about before, those in Jesus' hometown, they were, sort of set up for success in the sense that, they knew Jesus, they probably heard about him, like there was a relationship that existed. But I feel like the centurion had a lot against him. There was some things that, there was some things in which he was sort of trying on his part to be closer to God. You could say he was a God-fearing person. He built them the synagogue. He was, favorable amongst the Jewish leaders there. But he was a Roman centurion, right?
Yeah.
He led a
Gentile.
century of, and a Gentile, right? He was a Gentile. He led a century of Roman soldiers. This was the enemy of the Jews, right? A lot of the Jews thought that the Messiah would come to destroy Rome and set up an earthly kingdom. And so they're just hoping, that's the zealots, right? One of Jesus' disciples, before Jesus called him, that zealot was like, I'm going to, by force, oppose the Romans, right? Because they are our captors. We are in exile to them, in a sense. And so there's so much, because he's a Roman, because he's a centurion, because he's a Gentile. In another occasion where a Syrophoenician woman approaches Jesus, Jesus, at first, it seems that he's sort of denying her request to heal her daughter by saying, that the children of Israel have to be fed first. And then he uses the terminology that, we talk about. But this terminology of her being a dog, and it's not really her being a dog. He's talking about the Gentiles later, right? They're going to be ministered to later,
through Paul and Barnabas, etc.
So like Acts chapter 10, and so there's so much set up against him, and yet this man responds in a way that Jesus marvels at him. And he's got, one thing we haven't said about him yet is that he has a lot of power.
Yes.
He has a lot of authority as this Roman centurion.
He's high ranking.
He's in charge. Right, he's high ranking. He's in charge of a lot of people. And he even talks about that through messengers. He says, I say to this person, go, and he goes. And I say to this person, come, and he comes. And I have this authority. But what does he do with this authority? Does he allow that? Because one thing that authority does sometimes, one thing that power does a lot of times, it makes it very difficult to be humble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Well, you got a lot of power. It's like, who do I have to submit myself to? Right? I can do whatever I want to. But what happened here?
Yeah. Well, I'll say first of all, that my translation says amazed, and yours says marveled. So again, that synonym continuing. Um, when we see the centurion, we see what so many non-believers experience, and that is this gaping hole in their soul, quite frankly, that needs God, needs Christ. And he hears about Jesus, and that hole is immediately filled. That part of him that's missing, he can feel that that's being filled, that can be filled by Christ. So I think that there's a anxiousness to accept that, and an anxiousness to receive that. And it wasn't a fake faith, because Christ would have acknowledged that, and Christ would have felt that and seen that, because he was amazed, he marveled at his faith. It's a genuine faith that he experiences, in that I don't even need you here. Don't even come to me. I'm not worthy. Just heal him from where you're at. And but to contrast it with what we see in Mark, he's right there with them, and they're like, nah. He heals people, and they're still like, nah. So it's a stark contrast to what we see with his own people, and the point you're making of he's set up for failure, set up for success, is very appropriate, because that's exactly the case. That everybody to this point who was non-Jewish did not have access to God. The only way to have access through God was through his people. That's why Christ comes in, to give access to the whole world. And this man, who has no reason, quite frankly, to even reach out to Jesus, opens up this avenue. It begins. He's the first in this snowball effect into the whole world through Christ, and he opens that up because he could feel this. This is it.
Yeah. Well, I agree that it seems like he's looking for something.
Yes.
Right? It seems like he has that desire. He recognizes there's a hole.
Yeah.
Right? Because he attaches himself to the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Right? It says that he is worthy of you to grant this to him. He loves our nation. He built the synagogue. He recognizes that of the Jews, there is this connection to God. And so he has this relationship. I don't think he became a Jew.
No.
Because of his his role as a Roman centurion, right? He didn't become like a proselyte. I don't think he was a proselyte. But he had a relationship with them, and I think it is because he's trying to find something that fill that hole that's in all of us.
Yeah.
That we have since the Garden of Eden. When we left there's a hole for us to be with God.
Right.
I don't know at that point whether or not he recognized that Jesus was going to be the thing that filled that hole. I don't know if he recognized that or not. I think that he saw, or he had heard of what Jesus could do by his authority, because, at least he says that. He says, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof. He recognizes that there's a worthiness of Jesus, that he's unworthy. I think that might have to do with him being a Jew and a Gentile. Jews weren't allowed to go in Gentile homes.
Correct.
And so he says, for this reason I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But he says, for I also am a man placed under authority. So he recognizes that Jesus has authority.
Mm-hmm.
Authority to heal and to do these things. That's why he sent. So I'm not sure if he was ready at that point to say, Jesus, you're my Lord and my God, but he recognized that he had authority, and that he was, there were some that believed that Jesus was from God, but didn't believe that he was the Son of God, right? When we've talked about before the Great Confession, And when Jesus asked, "Who do people say that I am?" People said he was Elijah or he was John the Baptist, and so
Yeah.
they recognized those people as come from God.
Yeah.
Uh, but they didn't recognize him as the Son of God.
Right.
And so, but still, even though he may have not have known, I don't think he did know that Jesus was the Son of God. He still had faith
Yeah.
that the authority of Jesus was so supreme that if Jesus just said the word, I mean, that is an incredible faith. That is, I mean, just to say the word.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus put his hands on a lot of people and healed them,
Yeah.
right? And it's like that woman that, like, if I just touch the hem of his garment, then I'll be healed,
Right.
right? And what did Jesus say to her? Your faith is saved, or your faith has cleansed you.
Mm-hmm.
Go in peace, right? It's that faith. And of all people, the Roman centurion would probably have been the last person to have faith in the authority and the power of Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, just because of who he was and the position that he was in, and it's just like, why submit yourself under the authority of Christ when you have this authority over all these people and you have this government behind you?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just.
Well, I think. Go ahead. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
No.
I've said enough.
No, and I think that belief from the centurion, he, like you said, he did attach himself to the Jews because he felt God. And he may not have believed at that point Jesus is the Son of God, but he may have said, I know two things. I know God is real, and he is powerful. And I know this man is from God.
Yeah.
And that's that faith. And quite honestly, that's the beginning of the gospel and the beginning of who Jesus is. Because all that's true. Mm-hmm. And you would imagine that later on this gentleman comes to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and then that faith just continues to grow from there. But even if that's the minimum, that's what Jesus is amazed at, because that's what Jesus marveled at. Excuse me, because this guy had no reason for any of that. Rome's got their own gods. The Roman Empire, they have their own gods, but they didn't fill that hole in this man's heart and his soul, and he felt that God could. And so when he hears this man is from God, and he hears this man can do, speaks for God, he's like, I need his help. Yeah. And it's a servant. We don't know how high ranking the servant is. Is this a servant this guy really likes? Is it a low ranking servant? But it's a servant nonetheless.
Yeah, and he had compassion on it.
And he loved his. I imagine he's probably a good boss. Yeah. If a servant got sick, and it's because we see later a centurion whose son is sick, and he comes to Jesus. But this man's like, he's just one of my servants, but I know I need Jesus' help.
Yeah, it would be really nice if this centurion was Cornelius.
Yeah. That would be cool.
In Acts chapter 10, it says there was a man in Caesarea named Cornelius, a centurion. But here he's in Capernaum. So
yeah, that's true.
Maybe not the same guy. Probably
could have been transferred.
It would be cool. But anyway, so why is it that Jesus is amazed by this individual?
Yeah.
Why is he marveled? Even to the point, I mean, he doesn't say that of anybody else, I don't think. This idea that he says, I say to you, not even in Israel have I found such great faith. I feel like that's something like the centurion could be proud of, in a sense. Like, you know, he he's got that kind of faith.
Yeah.
But like, why does Jesus say that?
Yeah.
There are other people that had faith. Why is it that Jesus, said that about him? Why is it that Jesus marveled at this man?
Well, and it comes a lot back to how you're set up. It's more incredible, more amazing, more marveling for someone who has grown up in a, let's say, Muslim country, or who has grown up in a hostile country to Christianity, to find Christ and to have faith in Christ, than it is for me. And I'm not ashamed of that. That's just the reality of the situation. That, for somebody who has had to go for a longer path and had to hurdle more obstacles in their faith, it's more amazing. And I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the passages that talks about how there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner that repents versus like the rest that are just there and they've been faithful.
And it's also like the parable of the lost sheep. There's 99 that have been there the whole time, and that's great.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
But you don't just take the 99 and say, "Oh, this is good. We're good to go." You go find that 100th, and that's what Jesus does. And this centurion is one of those 100s, one of that 1%, if you will, because it's 1%, that had a hard path. And it's probably way more than 1%, but
no, it's many will
probably
be
more like 99%.
Yeah, but it's you've got people that are in bad situations, and there's so much against them.
Right.
And so it is very incredible, when a sinner comes and repents. The church is happy on the day that somebody's, becomes a Christian. You rejoice, and you may send them cards, and you may announce that several times over the next couple of weeks, and you're just really excited to have a new brother or sister in Christ, right? Why don't we rejoice all the time that, hey, this person's been a Christian for 13 years. This person's been a Christian for 25 years.
Yeah.
We don't have celebrations for that. But there's a reason why we don't have celebrations for that. Because the great step is to take that step in by faith. And so this is where both of these are connected. There's a marveling that takes place, and both of these have to do with faith.
Yeah.
So the hometown of Jesus, they didn't have faith. They should have had faith, but they didn't have faith. And what Jesus marvels at is what's said there in verse 9, when it says that he marveled, he turned and said to the crowd, "I say to you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." Right? That's where Jesus marveled. So it's interesting, and I think these are the only two places where Jesus has this sort of reaction. Or maybe it's not the only places where he had such a reaction, but like where it is explicitly said that he was amazed or marveled. There are times where he talks about people's faith. He says, to his disciples when he calms the storm, why is it that you lack this faith? You of little faith. And there's other places where Jesus is emotional and he's dealing with people, but it's just very interesting to me that both of these circumstances where it's explicitly said that he was in amazement of them had to do with faith.
Yeah.
So, Logan, do you have any thoughts to kind of wrap this up or kind of go along with that? Or
No, this has been a really fun episode for me. I've enjoyed this conversation. I think the way to kind of wrap it up, and for me anyway, is that you opened up by asking, does Jesus ever marveled at us? Um, and I think that kind of the first thing I talked about was the free will is part of maybe what Jesus is marveling at. That there's a point to where he knew what was going to happen. We don't know the extent of his omniscience again on Earth, but I think part of it is that he knew a basic framework of what was going to happen, and maybe I'm wrong on all that, but that these two instances were so beyond what he expected that he was like, "Wow." Because when I think of marveling, I think of that face I just made. Like the eyes get big, and like you're kind of like have to step back almost. Like, oh my goodness. And I think that these two instances, especially the centurion, because that's the positive one, they were so beyond what Christ even expected that it was like, this is amazing. I haven't seen this faith. And maybe he was marveling at the lack of faith in the Jewish community.
Yeah.
Maybe that's and that's if that's so, that's sad, because that would mean both of these instances he's marveling at the bad stuff and amazed at how bad things are. But I think that there's
it does say he marveled at him.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So there is a positive marveling.
Okay, good. So, well then, that being said, what is so to go back? Does Jesus marvel at us? I don't think so anymore, because now he's in heaven. He is with God. I feel like he's probably more fully omniscient than he was when he was on earth. But I don't think we should stop that that should stop us from trying. I'm going to be my best because I want my faith to marvel Christ. I want my faith, because I'm a Gentile and 99% of the people watching this are Gentiles. I want to marvel Christ like the centurion did. I want my faith to be so great. And it's about me. It's about, what am I going to do? How is my faith going to be better today than it was yesterday?
Yeah. Here's another episode. God's emotions.
We got to stop these
and responses.
But I love it. That's a good one.
Because there were times, and I don't think marveling was there, but like there were decisions and things that were made where God, like, he responded to people in the moment.
Yeah.
Even like with Moses and different things like that.
Absolutely.
So I think that when you talked about the free will, I think that that's really important. And that even goes with the problem of evil a little bit. Like, why does God allow for free will?
Yeah.
Well, in addition to, the likelihood and the possibility that we do great evil, only by free will can we do all of the great and virtuous things.
Yeah.
And it's by our own decision. It's only by our discretion that we respond in such a way. And so that's what makes this so amazing.
Yep.
Is you have a person that, with the centurion, he's set up for failure, but he strives towards God. It seems like he is. And then he humbles himself with this great humility. And I think that's what Jesus just marvels at. Wow, you've done. Maybe it's not what Jesus expected, but it's certainly not what the world would expect.
Correct.
Of him to do. And so I guess the question for us is, if Jesus were to marvel at us, why?
Yeah.
Is it, because we will face times in our lives where the easiest thing to do is to just go along with the world, or to give in to sin, or will we do what's tougher and humble ourselves, submit ourselves to Him?
Mm-hmm.
When we've got a difficult decision, or we are put in a great temptation, or, you know, will we do what the world expects us to do and give into the comfort, or will we submit ourselves to Christ?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
No, it's good.
Anyway, let's go ahead. We're
Very
going to
good.
wrap it up there. And thank you so much for tuning in with us today. Logan is going to close us out with a prayer, and please stick around for the servant spotlight as well.
Yeah. Let's pray. Dear God, I'm thankful for today. I'm thankful for this episode. I'm thankful for Zach and the amount of time and effort he puts into this as well. Lord, I'm thankful for everybody who's listening to this podcast. I pray that it's been uplifting. And Lord, I pray that you are glorified ultimately. God, be with us as we go throughout our days, and be with us as we meet other people. Please help us to act like Christ to everyone we meet. It's in His name we pray. Amen. Service Spotlight today is going to be actually Bo Stevens, and he just passed away this past week, but he was the preacher at Troop Church of Christ, and he has gone to be with his Lord and our Lord, and we're praying for his family, but he did a lot of good in the Troop community. He was the preacher for a long time, and I know his son, and both his sons actually, and but he's gone to be with our Lord. But Servant Spotlight is going to go to him this week, and we're thankful for his service, and I'm jealous that he's with Jesus. Have a good day. Thanks for watching.